Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Abraham Lincoln, Part 13, Battle of Antietam, Maryland. We stopped last time in July of 1862, and during that time there was fighting on the Virginia Peninsula, which is between the York and James Rivers in Virginia. And this was a big Confederate victory and Union defeat, and this was devastating to morale in the North. Secretary of State William Seward, in letters to his wife, begged for details of daily life at home, and he wrote to her and he said, quote, "Write to me then cheerfully of boys and girls and dogs and horses and birds that sing and stars that shine and never weep, and be blessed for all your days for thus helping to sustain a spirit." So he was having the nightmare of the war was ongoing. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, during this time, his infant son James died on July 10th from the effects of the smallpox vaccine. Now, Battlefield Reports 1862 indicated the importance of slaves supporting the Confederate war effort. They were digging trenches for the Confederate Army. They worked as teamsters, cooks, hospital attendants. On the home front, they were tilling the fields, planting crops, picking cotton. And so they didn't take a genius to see that if the slaves joined the Union side, this would be a big advantage. A transfer of people, all the slaves in the South from the Confederacy to the Union, this would have a major positive effect for the Union. And it really was becoming obvious there was a military necessity to free the slaves in the South to win the war. On July 22nd, President Lincoln met with his cabinet and read his Emancipation proclamation, which would free the slaves in the Confederate States. And the important language reads thus, quote, "As a fit and necessary military measure, all persons held as slaves within any state or states wherein the constitutional authority of the United States shall not then be practically recognized, shall then henceforward and forever be free." Now, this didn't apply to the border slave states, which had been loyal to the Union, namely Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri. However, President Lincoln decided he was persuaded to wait for a military victory to make his proclamation. The second summer of the war was the Union Army was retreating, and the public in the North was restless. Now, again, on that day, July 22nd, when Lincoln revealed to the cabinet the Emancipation Proclamation, a famous painting was painted by Francis Carpenter. The title is "The First Reading of the Emancipation Proclamation." And again, this would give a tremendous advantage, transferring the massive workforce of the slaves from the Confederacy to the Union, and it was turning the war into a war to end slavery. And it was believed that this would get support from the common people of Europe for the Union effort. President Lincoln, early in the war, lacked contact with the black community. However, later Frederick Douglass became a good friend, and black soldiers who joined the Union Army helped him to have a deeper understanding of the commitment that black Americans had to live in the United States. And this led him to abandon thoughts of colonization, of having black Americans leave and either go to West Africa, the Caribbean, or Central America. At the end of June, Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, in the capital of the Confederacy, Richmond, Virginia, could hear cannons from the hostile Union Army threatening the Confederate capital. At the end of August, President Lincoln in Washington, D.C. could hear Confederate artillery and fighting near the Capitol. So there was, both capitals were in danger that summer. In October, President Lincoln wrote, quote, "May our children and our children's children to 1,000 generations continue to enjoy the benefits conferred upon us by a united country, and have cause yet to rejoice under these glorious institutions. bequeathed us by George Washington and his compeers. So you see his commitment to the Union and understanding of what a blessing it was that we were one large country. Historian Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote, quote, William Seward was the one man in the cabinet Abraham Lincoln trusted completely, the only one who fully appreciated his unusual strengths as a leader, and the only one he could call an intimate friend. The public was beginning to understand how much the massive manpower that was needed to fight the war, because you had so many people, so many Union troops dying, and therefore the need for black troops, for African American troops. And President Lincoln was watching this change in public opinion, and he wrote, quote, A man watches his pear tree day after day, impatient for the ripening of the fruit. But let him patiently wait, and the ripe pear at length falls in his lap. And then he wrote Lincoln that he was watching, quote, this great revolution in public sentiment, slowly but surely progressing. So he was really waiting for the public to come to the conclusion that slavery needed to end before he could make this public commitment through the Emancipation Proclamation. In July of 1862, in Tennessee and Kentucky, there were guerrilla attacks by Confederate generals Nathan Bedford Forrest and John Hunt Morgan behind Union lines. There was little Union support in the South. These bushwhackers, the insurgents who had day jobs, would attack Union soldiers at night. President Lincoln appointed General John Pope the new head of the Army for Virginia on June 26th. On July 11th, President Lincoln replaced General George McClellan with Henry Halleck as General-in-Chief. Halleck believed that in damaging the enemy with the least risk to his own troops, of course, you couldn't damage the enemy without risking your own troops. Henry Halleck did not look like a hero. He was 5'9", 190 pounds, overweight. He looked old. But he was the guy President Lincoln turned to next. July 15th, President Lincoln was weary, careworn, troubled, and sad. He believed that McClellan would never fight. During this time, General Burnside achieved victory for the Union at Roanoke Island, North Carolina, a vital outpost in the Union effort to tighten the blockade on the Atlantic coast and hurt the Confederacy economically. President Lincoln asked General Burnside to replace McClellan as head of the Army of the Potomac, but Burnside turned him down because he considered McClellan a good friend. President Lincoln believed Henry Halleck needed to be the one to take responsibility for the supervision of the Army, and Halleck became the public face of the Union forces. And so Lincoln said, quote, "You must call on General Halleck, who commands." Another quote by President Lincoln from this time, quote, "Public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Consequently, he who molds sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces decisions." President Lincoln was working hard, listening to the public, looking for ways to communicate his vision to the country, and the answer became newspapers. Newspapers were very powerful at that time. Now, when Lincoln had been born, there were 250 newspapers in the United States. By the time the Civil War started, there were 2,500, and he himself was a newspaper junkie. He loved reading the newspaper, and this was really the only way you could find out what was going on. Newspaper editors often wrote letters to President Lincoln offering their advice. Horace Greeley was the most powerful newspaper editor. President Lincoln wrote, quote, "Having Horace Greeley firmly behind me will be as helpful as an army of 100,000 men." So this is because Greeley had such a powerful effect on public opinion. And Horace Greeley had maintained constant pressure on President Lincoln to free the slaves. In August of 1862, First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln's brother Alec died in fighting in Louisiana near Vicksburg, Mississippi. The Pittsfield Sun newspaper wrote, quote, "The wife of the President of the United States mourns the death of a brother. killed while leading a rebel regiment against the Union troops. This was the second brother of Mary to die fighting for the Confederacy so far. In August, Christian ministers came and met with President Lincoln in the White House, and they wanted him to abolish slavery. And he asked how could he abolish slavery in the South, because without military success, without a defeat of the South. And he told a joke about from history that there was a papal bull against a comet. Pope Calixtus III excommunicated Halley's Comet in 1456. So he was kind of saying, comparing this desire, without a defeat of the South, freeing the slaves wouldn't mean anything. Nice historical reference to Halley's Comet. Horace Greeley on August 19th wrote, quote, "On the face of this wide earth, Mr. President, there is not one disinterested, determined, intelligent champion of the Union cause who does not feel that all attempts to put down the rebellion and at the same time uphold its inciting cause are preposterous and futile, that the rebellion, if crushed out tomorrow, would be renewed within a year if slavery were left in full vigor." So again, this pressure on President Lincoln to end slavery. Now, President Lincoln had a public response to Greeley's letter, August 22nd, quote, "I would save the Union. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery." Now, President Lincoln knew that most people in the South wanted to save slavery, and many Northerners also opposed freedom for the slaves. Most Union soldiers had enlisted to save the Union, not to end slavery. So this was a very delicate, difficult issue. Horace Greeley was impatient, but President Lincoln was patient. August 2nd was the Second Battle of Manassas Junction, Bull Run, Virginia, 13 months after the first battle. Again, it was a defeat. The Union Army was led in Virginia there by General John Pope. The Confederate general was Stonewall Jackson. And the Confederates attacked Union supplies there, and they captured 100 railroad freight cars, countless warehouses with lobster salad, Rhine wine, new shoes, ladies' hats, oysters, cheese, and candy, among other things. General George McClellan refused to help Pope and send reinforcements. And so this was another very discouraging defeat. 14,000 Union casualties at the Second Battle of Bull Run, Manassas Junction, 8,000 Confederate casualties. McClellan maintained his popularity among the common Union soldiers. President Lincoln was discouraged and said he was almost ready to hang himself. So after this Second Battle of Bull Run, this defeat, every hospital bed in Washington City was filled with wounded soldiers. The streets of Washington were crowded with stragglers and deserters, and President Lincoln fell into a deep depression. August 30th, there were 400 vehicles, 2,000 horses and mules, and 1,000 drivers who were recovering the wounded from the battlefield. So another severe, lot of death. Now, one of the nurses from this time, Nurse Ella Wolcott, wrote, quote, "It is no light thing to hear a man say he owes you his life, and then to know that mother, wife, sister, or child bless you in their prayers." Another nurse, Elvira Powers, wrote, quote, "I am hearing too many blessings nowadays from sick and dying men to be in doubt any longer whether or not I am doing good." The Mansion House Hospital was the largest of the Army's 14 general hospitals in Alexandria, Virginia, 516 beds. At the beginning of the Civil War, the primary source of trained nurses were from Catholic nuns who staffed 28 Catholic hospitals in the U.S. 78% of the men in the Union Army suffered from diarrhea during the Civil War, from dirty drinking water. They called it the Tennessee Quick Step. The abolitionists continued to pressure President Lincoln about slavery. And President Lincoln responded, and he said, quote, "Do you remember that a few years ago Charles Blondin walked a tightrope stretched over the falls of Niagara? Suppose all the nation's goods, achievements, were crammed in a wheelbarrow and there was security. The security of and safety of everyone's home depended on Blondin's success. Would you shout, "Blondin, to the right, step to the left," or stand there speechless, hold your breath, and pray to God Almighty to guide him? See, he was trying to explain this delicate balancing act he was in because of the border states, which were slave states, and public opinion in the North, which was still slowly coming around, but still had a lot of opposition to ending slavery in the North. During the Civil War, there were 7,000 Jewish troops in the Union Army. President Lincoln signed a bill providing Jewish chaplains to help them. President Lincoln left his dog Fido in Springfield when they came to Washington City. In the White House, they had cats named Tabby and Dixie. At a state dinner, President Lincoln fed Tabby with a gold fork from President Buchanan's term, and Mary's response to this that it was, quote, "shameful." In September, President Lincoln was continuing to wait for the military victory that he needed for the release of the Emancipation Proclamation. Congress continued to pressure him about slavery, specifically Charles Sumner, Henry Wilson, and Thaddeus Stevens. It reminded President Lincoln of a story of a boy in Sunday school who was struggling to read out loud the names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And at one point in his exasperation, he said, look there, here comes them same three damn fellers again." So when he was referring to these three congressmen who kept coming, giving him a hard time. And that's a nice, he was always good with a story based on a situation. President Lincoln became the first president to receive a delegation of African Americans in the White House. And he hoped that he had this idea that colonization, the idea that if black Americans could move out of the country to Central America, that this would make emancipation more popular. People would support freeing of the slaves if they believed the blacks were going to leave, go to Africa, Central America, or the Caribbean. Of course, but he was understanding more and more that they did not want to leave. They considered America their country. August 14th was the day he welcomed these 5 black leaders, including Frederick Douglass. And he was talking about the suffering of black Americans. And he hoped that these black leaders would support African American colonization. However, they did not. And Frederick Douglass specifically was against the idea. President Lincoln wanted to know what the will of God was. Well, it's not always easy. After the Second Battle of Bull Run, both armies rested. Robert E. Lee, the top Confederate general, knew that the South could not win a long war. The North had the advantage in men and resources, and Lee was hoping to end the war. So he decided to invade Maryland and attack, that this would really crush public opinion in the North and lead to a ceasefire and peace. And so that was on September 4th. That when the Confederate troops started to enter Maryland, President Lincoln believed the Maryland citizens would welcome Confederate troops because Maryland was a slave state. However, that did not happen. They received a cool reception, in large part because the Confederate troops were so poor and shabby. And so Maryland, as the slave state, was becoming more and more pro-Union, and they welcomed Union troops. September 14th, President Lincoln and Henry Halleck were waiting news as fighting was imminent in Maryland. Halleck had an attack of hemorrhoids, and the treatment was an opium suppository. September 17th was the start of the Battle of Antietam, Maryland, and the battle President Lincoln was waiting for. There were 6,500 Union and Confederate soldiers killed in one day. More deaths in one day than all the other wars of the 19th century, including the War of 1812, the wars against American Indians, the Mexican War, the Spanish-American War. But, however, as this was considered the Battle of Antietam, the most bloody battle in American history, more bloody than Shiloh, This was considered a Union victory, and this led President Lincoln to decide to release the Emancipation Proclamation. And he went public September 22nd, where he was talking about it. And the South had a chance till January. If they freed their slaves, they could receive compensation, but after that, they would get no money. In October of 1862, after Antietam, President Lincoln came to the battlefield and with some friends, and he was on a hilltop looking at the vast army camp spread before them. President Lincoln said to his friends, quote, "Do you know what this is?" The friends said, "It is the Army of the Potomac." And President Lincoln said, "So it is called, but that is a mistake. It is only General McClellan's bodyguard." President Lincoln was disappointed that General McClellan did not follow up and attack Lee's army after Antietam. In October, for the first time in letters home and in diaries, Union soldiers starting to refer to President Lincoln as Father Abraham. In November, a delegation of women visited the White House, and they were asking President Lincoln for encouragement during this terrible Civil War. And Lincoln said, quote, "I have no word of encouragement to give. Our people and our generals have not yet made up their minds that we are involved in an awful war. Our officers seem to think the war can be won by plans and strategy. That is not true. Only hard and tough fighting will win." President Lincoln told a story before he read out loud to his cabinet the Emancipation Proclamation, a selection from a book by called High-Handed Outrage at Utica by humorist Artemus Ward. And supposedly there was a big burly feller who saw wax figures of the apostles from the Last Supper, and he decided and went ahead and destroyed the head of Judas. And he said, quote, "That Judas Iscariot can't show himself in Utica with impunity by a darn sight." So that was a little humor. President Lincoln decided that if God gave victory to the Union at Antietam, he would release the Emancipation Proclamation, and January 1 was the scheduled date for it to be official. That would mean all slaves in the rebel states would be free. He would sign that on January 1st. So this was a big change in the purpose of the war from restoring the Union to ending slavery. Horace Greeley responded, quote, "God bless Abraham Lincoln." 1862, there were biennial elections, and the Democrats did well. This was a defeat for President Lincoln, and partly the public didn't like the Emancipation Proclamation. And, of course, the war wasn't going well. So this was more hard times. November 5th, President Lincoln removed General McClellan in command of the Army of the Potomac and replaced him with General Ambrose P. Burnside. December 1st, President Lincoln wrote, quote, "Without slavery, the rebellion could never have existed. Without slavery, it could not continue." And so he said that the slavery was the cause of the war. President Lincoln continued, quote, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free, honorable alike in what we give and what we preserve. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth." So, General Burnside, during this time, decided to attack Fredericksburg, Virginia. There were 13,000 Union casualties, 5,000 Confederate casualties, so this was a very tough Union defeat. And December 3rd, President Lincoln had a message for the Army, and he said, quote, "Although you were not successful, the attempt was not made in error. The courage with which you, in an open field, maintained the contest against an entrenched foe shows that you possess all the qualities of a great army." Now back to the Emancipation Proclamation. It threatened to break up the tenuous coalition of Republicans and war Democrats and border state leaders. So this was sort of he had waited long, but he went ahead with it, and this was a turning point in the war, and people's thinking needed to change, and it strained this, as I mentioned, this tenuous coalition. So this was President Lincoln was in. This was a tough time because of largely because of this the issue of slavery, ending slavery, being promoted as something that he was for. Now the slaves did hear about the proclamation through the grapevine, and they prepared to escape to freedom. They thought, well, if we can make our way to the Union armies, we will be free. The public opinion in Great Britain changed, and it became impossible to support the Confederacy after the proclamation because the public was against slavery in Great Britain, and they could see that this was a war to end slavery in the United States. September 24th, President Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus for the whole country, and this was dealing with those who were aiding the enemy, the rights of people, especially those who were speaking or writing in being very critical of the government or wanting to end the war. And Democrats started calling President Lincoln a dictator for this. Again, the fall elections, Republicans lost. Public in the North was tired of the war. This was a low point. Union General Fitz John Porter said that the Emancipation Proclamation, quote, was ridiculed in the Army, causing disgust, discontent, and expressions of disloyalty. Well, people were different. There were guys in the Union Army who didn't like the Emancipation Proclamation, although there were others who did. President Lincoln believed that men committed to abolition and emancipation would be inspired to enlist in the Union Army, and this would offset those who were offended by the Emancipation Proclamation who left the Army. And he was right in that belief that there were guys who enlisted because of it and guys who left, but they still had the same number. President Lincoln believed that the generals and the people did not recognize that the country was at war and there was hard, tough fighting needed to win the war. President Lincoln continued to meet the public from 10 a.m. to noon, Monday through Friday, and in the afternoon. And this was giving President Lincoln what public opinion was like, talking with the public, finding what people were thinking. President Lincoln believed that Christian ministers were important for the morale of Union troops. He gave an order that each regiment should have a Christian minister, and he said, quote, "If there were more praying and less swearing, it would be better for our country." In November, President Lincoln gave the order, quote, "The importance for man and beast of the prescribed weekly rest, the sacred rights of Christian soldiers and sailors, a becoming deference to the best sentiments of a Christian people, and a due regard for the divine will demand that Sunday labor in the Army and Navy be reduced to a minimum." In October and November, there was an uprising of Sioux Indians in Minnesota who had been very much mistreated. And in that uprising, 350 white Americans were killed. As a result, 1,500 American Indians were arrested. 303 were scheduled for execution. President Lincoln was able to reduce that number to 38. And this created resentment against Lincoln in Minnesota among European descent Americans who wanted more vengeance for the Indian attacks. Every Union soldier knew that President Lincoln supported the nurses in hospitals. He visited the sick. He did his best to make sure the soldiers were paid on time and were supplied well. Every day, President Lincoln had open office hours and visitors, including soldiers who would come visit him. President Lincoln knew the importance of humor, and he said, quote, "It seems as if neither death nor danger could quench the grim humor of the American soldier." Secretary of State Seward wanted to resign during this time, near the end of 1862, and President Lincoln said, quote, "Ah, yes, Governor, that will do very well for you, but I am like the caged starling. I can't get out." President Lincoln was discouraged. He was working to create harmony in the cabinet during this very stressful time, and so it was very tough times in the war for the whole country. Union soldiers saw suffering in the face of President Lincoln. William C. Davis said, quote, "In seeing Abraham Lincoln so visibly carrying the weight of responsibility for the war, the Union soldiers saw that in his way he suffered as they did, and though he did not face death in battle or disease or discomfort in the camps, still that landscape of cares in his face let them know that he too was a casualty. It bound them to him in a way they never experienced with any commander of their army." The Union soldiers began to see that the end of slavery was a cause that God would approve, and this increased their determination to win the war. Well, that concludes today's presentation. We'll continue next time with part 14. Hope you find a good history book to read. There are so many wonderful history books out there. You might consider checking out our website, Adventures in History with Peter J. Ray at peterjray.com. So far, we've made 728 history videos in 8 areas: world history, American history, book reviews, poetic tours, Cleveland baseball, family history, autobiography, and Cleveland basketball. There's a donate feature. You might consider making a donation to support this work. If you live in Metro Manila, Philippines, and are looking for a high school, you might consider Restless Educational Center. Restless is located on Allenby Street, not far from the corner of P. Guevara and Wilson Street in San Juan, Metro Manila, Philippines. At Restless, we specialize in helping young people who have had difficulty in the larger traditional high schools. We strive to make school enjoyable so the students enjoy going to school, enjoy learning, and we strive to be creative and innovative. So and the website is restless.education, RESALEST. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.